A close friend used to have problems dealing with her emotions. She would overreact to every small challenge or difficulty in her way, even to minor events like an acquaintance canceling their meetup at the last minute. She would often start crying, get overly emotional, and throw tantrums. After a while, I warned her to get her emotional reactions under control. I mean, if she cannot handle small inconveniences without excess, how is she going to handle real problems throughout life? Her response made me create this video because she perfectly highlighted the collective illusion most of us share. My friend replied that she is, in fact, well aware of her unhealthy habits and that she is actively trying to change them by avoiding stressful situations, trying to stop crying and feeling overwhelmed while she's doing it. I assume you probably came to the same conclusion when facing challenges. You try to avoid stress and force yourself to change in the heat of the moment, but it is not working. Instinctively, these solutions seem to make sense. It seems logical to try to reduce stress in your life and work on breaking bad habits. However, this approach will always fail. Human beings are not robots. We cannot change our behavior on demand whenever we feel like it. Our current behavior is the result of years of experiences and conditioning. As shown in relation to age, the older you become, the more likely you are to be set in your ways. This does not mean that change is not possible. It simply means that you need to change your approach. How your mind influences your behavior. To begin with, this way of thinking is flawed due to a philosophical fallacy called the false dilemma. This fallacy occurs when a situation seems to present only two possible options, even though there are other alternatives that have not been considered. In the example above, my friend fell into this trap by believing she had only two choices, either face or avoid stressful situations. If she could not avoid them, she thought her only options were to throw her usual tantrums or force herself to change instantly. If you examine the situation closely, you will always find another solution. When presented with limited choices, it is natural to make the best of a bad situation. However, this black and white thinking was preventing her from addressing the deeper issue. The easiest solution to any problem is to ignore it and run away, but that does not make the problem disappear. Just like fear, avoidance only makes the issue grow bigger and more intimidating over time. The real issue my friend faced had nothing to do with the situations themselves. As I mentioned earlier, most of these events were minor and ordinary. Her real challenge was her lack of emotional stability, something rooted in her personality rather than the circumstances she experienced. She cannot avoid these situations because there are no specific situations to avoid. There is no single trigger. And even if there was, the way to develop a stronger mindset is by facing challenges and overcoming them, not by running away and hoping to avoid future problems. Life is full of challenges and there will always be more to come. As I previously mentioned, trying to force a sudden change in behavior during an emotional moment is nearly impossible. Excessive emotional reactions put you in a different mental state, where logical reasoning is no longer accessible. Emotional and logical reasoning cannot coexist in such moments. Your reactions are the result of a conditioned link between certain situations and your emotional state. You cannot simply break this connection at will like flipping an off switch. In psychology, this concept is known as association, the linking of one mental state to another. While this association often causes mindset and behavioral problems, it can also serve as a powerful tool for creating effective solutions. Training your mind to make different mental connections. Association works by linking a current mental state to a past event, essentially saying, this feels similar to something that happened before. I should react the same way I did then. The more you repeat those reactions, the stronger those connections become. This entire process happens subconsciously. For example, when my friend encounters a similar situation, her mind refers back to past experiences and concludes that the appropriate response is to act the same way she always has, by being hysterical and throwing tantrums. Association is a foundational concept in many behavioral theories and is famously demonstrated through Pavlov's classical conditioning. However, within the problem lies the solution. Our future behavior is shaped by our past behavior. While we are not robots with an on-off button, we have been programmed through repetition to act and react in specific ways. The way to change your mindset and make lasting changes is to consciously reprogram yourself to act differently. The key is not to try changing in the heat of the moment, as success in such situations is highly unlikely. Instead, the focus should be on preparing yourself in advance, training your mind to react differently when there is no immediate trigger, no stressful situation, and no potential danger. This works much like physical training. If I asked you to lift an object that is too heavy for you, you would not be able to lift it at that moment. However, you could spend time strength training, gradually increasing your capacity to handle heavier weights. When you try again after this preparation, you will be ready because you built the strength beforehand. As Aristotle supposedly said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act but a habit. The same principle applies to changing your mindset. If you avoid challenges and fail to build resilience, you will be unprepared when life inevitably brings hardships. On the other hand, if you intentionally put yourself in uncomfortable situations and push your limits when it is safe to do so, you will be ready to handle similar challenges when they arise in real life. Mind training, overcoming fear of the dark. Everything I've explained so far has been scientific, but that might not directly address your problem. You likely do not care about what something is called in psychology or how many experts agree on it. You want to know how this can actually help you. Well, here's how it helped me. You can look at my story to see how the principles I've discussed apply in real life. When I was a child, I had an overwhelming fear of the dark. As soon as the lights were turned off, my imagination would run wild, creating terrifying scenarios in a very vivid setting. This led to constant anxiety, feelings of dread, and many sleepless nights. Because this fear was deeply rooted in me, it carried on into my teenage years. By the time I was older, I wasn't necessarily afraid of the dark itself, but I still felt an intense sense of anxiety and discomfort when I was in a dark place, especially if I was alone. Over the years, I built an association pattern in my mind. Darkness, uncomfortable fear. Logically, I knew that there was nothing there and that I wasn't in danger. However, every time I found myself in a dimly lit place, my mind would instantly jump to every horror movie I had ever seen, convincing me of a false reality where terrible things were about to happen. In other words, I couldn't think logically because emotional reasoning took over. Just like my friend from earlier, I fell victim to my programming. I tried to avoid dark places and kept the darkness away from my life as much as possible. When I realized that wasn't feasible, I told myself, next time it gets dark, I will just stop being scared. Of course, none of it worked. But I decided to take an objective look at my situation and recognize the psychological pattern I've built up over the years. More importantly, I decided to use that same way of thinking to reverse the effects. So I tried a new approach. Whenever I was in a situation where I didn't need to be in the dark, I still decided to do it. When I was going down the staircase of my building, I didn't turn on the light. If I could go under the street lights when walking home, I stayed in the dark part of the alley. When I was home alone, I would stand at the edge of the darkness, staring at it, with light surrounding me from 3 other directions. Next time, I took 1 step forward into the dark. Time after that, 2 steps. Before I knew it, I was in the middle of a dark room, surrounded by nothing but complete darkness, and I was surprisingly okay with it. I used my understanding of how my mind forms associations and combined it with a self-applied form of exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is a popular treatment for anxiety disorders, which involves gradually exposing yourself to the source of your distress. Can you do it? Of course you can. You just need to understand that it's not going to be comfortable, but that's the whole point. The first time I tried this, it was extremely uncomfortable. It was truly one of the most frightening experiences I had at the time. But the more I exposed myself to my fear, the more a new pattern began to form, and eventually I stopped associating darkness with fear. Now, when I go to bed, I feel completely at ease. I no longer think about horror movies or look for scary shapes in the room. My mindset has changed, and with it, my perception, health, and overall happiness have improved as well. Even though I used fear as an example in my story, this method can be applied to anything that causes you distress, whether it's hurtful comments, harsh feedback, yelling, anxiety, or anything else. The key is to recognize the mental connection between the cause, A, and the behavior, B, and then consciously work on associating the cause, A, with a different behavior, C. Old association. Something happens, A, you react badly, B. New association. Something happens, A, you react differently, C. Training your mind, whether it's developing or breaking habits, improving your perception or changing mental associations, does not happen overnight. It's a process that works similarly to overcoming addiction. First, you need to go through detoxification, removing the negative patterns from your mind and starting with a clean slate. Once you've reset personally, you can begin shaping your mindset and personality in the way you desire. If you find yourself stuck in a loop, unable to change or commit, don't believe that real change is impossible. You're probably just approaching it the wrong way. Use the methods in this video to shape yourself into a better person. You deserve it.